Let's get it right. 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 You already know what it is, man. It's your boy Dealatofficial, and this is No Filters. Always appreciate you hitting that like button for me, subscribing to the channel so you don't miss an episode, and sharing this with the world. And of course, family, when you come in, get comfortable. Get you something to eat, get you something to drink, get you something to smoke if that's what you do. Cause you see the title, fam. Woo! Let's get into this here.
Authorizing 2 strikes on an alleged White House defending Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was under growing scrutiny after authorizing 2 strikes on an alleged drug
Ruth in the building, Lori in the building. We already got Snow, Lori.
About the second strike, reportedly targeting 2 survivors. The Washington Post reporting Hegseth ordered his team to kill everybody on board the boat. Lawmakers from both parties asking serious questions, particularly about that second strike and what President Trump is now saying about the second strike. Here's Martha Raddatz tonight.
Tonight, the Pentagon facing accusations of war crimes after a second strike on a boat carrying suspected drug traffickers off the coast of Venezuela. This video from September 2nd shows the first hit on the boat, but tonight, questions are growing about a second missile that was fired. According to the Washington Post, it was targeting 2 survivors who were clinging to the wreckage. Tonight, members of both parties sounding the alarm, saying international law prohibits killing enemy combatants who no longer pose a threat. The Post reporting that at the outset of the operation, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had ordered his team to kill everybody on board the boat. Hegseth has called the Washington Post report fabricated, saying the military acted in compliance with the law of armed conflict. Overnight, President Trump said he didn't know anything about the second strike, adding he wouldn't have wanted it.
We'll look into it, but no, I wouldn't have wanted that, not a second strike. The first strike was very lethal, it was fine, and if there were 2 people around, but Pete said that didn't happen.
But today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed there was more than 1 strike on the boat. She didn't confirm or deny that survivors were targeted. Leavitt saying the strikes were authorized by Hegseth and carried out by the mission's commander, Navy Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley.
On September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated.
ABC's Rachel Scott pressing, asking how did those 2 survivors present a threat to the U.S.?
And what imminent threat would 2 survivors pose who were clinging presumably to the wreckage of that boat?
Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law.
Tonight, Democratic and Republican lawmakers demanding answers.
You know, that is against the Geneva Conventions. That's against the laws of war, which we should always be abiding by. We're the United States of America. We have to hold our people to a higher standard. This is really serious.
And David, tonight in a rare bipartisan statement, top Republicans and Democrats are vowing to get to the bottom of this and determine the facts. And while the White House defended the September strikes today, by mid-October, when another suspected drug boat was hit, the survivors were rescued and returned to their home countries. David?
Martha Raddatz live in Washington. Martha, thank you.
In a rare break from the Trump administration, the Republican-led Armed Services Committee in the House and Senate are investigating deadly West strike on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. The probes come in the wake of a Washington Post report about a September 2nd strike, the first of at least 21 attacks that have killed 83 people to date. The Post cites 2 sources with direct knowledge who said Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered the attack leave no survivors, resulting in a follow-up strike to kill 2 men who had survived the initial attack. MS now has not independently verified that report. Joining me now is the Democratic member of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Eugene Vindman of Virginia. It's good to see you again, Congressman. I'm curious who you'd like to talk to, what evidence you want to see to figure out what really happened there.
Well, first of all, I would say that these boat strikes demand a full investigation by the House Armed Services Committee, by the Senate Armed Services Committee. What we're seeing right now has raised concerns with me for some time as a former Army judge advocate, general, officer, and infantry officer, a prosecutor, an advisor to commanders in the field. I've had questions about these strikes since they started. It all goes back to labeling these drug traffickers as narco-terrorists, which I believe is a inadequate classification. And it goes to this order from the secretary, apparently of no quarter, which is an obvious war crimes violation.
So as someone who has experience with this, what would you need to be able to know with a high degree of certainty before you ordered a strike like this?
So I would need to know who it was that were striking. I would need to know what this boat was, what it was carrying. I would need to know if there were any collateral, is any potential for collateral damage, other civilians, civilian infrastructure, the rules of engagement for this strike, and I would need to know the chain of command, who has the authority to authorize a strike. Is it the Secretary of Defense? Is it the Southcom commander? So there's a whole host of questions, and all of those details that I just mentioned are the details that we would need to see and hear from the Department of Defense in order to determine what happened, whether any laws were violated, all the way from the labeling of these organizations and these individuals as narco-terrorists, which is a completely new status, not recognized in any law, to this particular strike where there is a apparent order for no quarter.
So House Republicans, have shown the White House an extraordinary amount of deference since Trump returned to office. Do you believe that the chairman of your committee, Mike Rogers, would actually do a deep and believable investigation? Would he bring, for example, Pete Hegseth in to testify?
I guess I would start by saying that the fact that too much deference has been shown is what landed us in this situation where we have potentially the Secretary of Defense and uniformed service members violating a number of laws, everything from the law of war in this direction for no quarter to the actual strikes themselves, this whole host of strikes under this new theory, this new legal theory that they're narco-terrorists. I do believe that Chairman Rogers will conduct a fulsome investigation. We will certainly demand it from both the Democratic side and from what I've heard behind closed doors during some of these briefings from Republican colleagues as well. I think there's no choice at this point but to fully investigate and then obviously hold those folks that were liable accountable. We know that on this particular strike, or we understand from the story that this order was given and that these individuals that were in the water that posed no threat to U.S. forces were struck again in this double tap strike. We also know that subsequently there were members that actually, it sounds like they may have defied the Secretary's order because we had 2 survivors that were released back to their home countries. And so at some point, somebody had determined that
Our top story this morning is lawmakers from both sides of the aisle demanding answers from the Trump administration about recent U.S. military operations in the Caribbean. This bipartisan scrutiny comes in the wake of new reporting from the Washington Post that one attack on a boat suspected of smuggling drugs, a follow-up strike was ordered after the initial impact left survivors on board. According to the Post, citing 2 sources with direct knowledge in a September 2nd strike, the first in the administration's ongoing offensive, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave a verbal command to kill everybody on the boat.
And it bears repeating, we don't know who was on that boat.
But after the missile hit and the smoke cleared, 2 survivors were seen clinging to the wreckage. The paper goes on to report that the Special Operations Commander overseeing the attack then ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's instructions.
By the way, when that strike was ordered, the person ordering that strike knew that was a war crime. It is in the most, and we'll talk to the general in a second. It's been part of international law. It's been part of the laws of war since World War II. They knew that was an illegal action, that could constitute a war crime.
And as the Post puts it, quote, the two men, the report by the Washington Post, President Trump put out this video of the attack later that day, but it did not show any footage. Now, Republican-led committees in both chambers of Congress are pushing back, and the top Republican and Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Republican Roger, wanting vigorous oversight to determine the facts related to these circumstances. And the House Armed Services Committee echoed that vow, saying it is, quote, committed to providing rigorous oversight and are taking bipartisan action to gather a full accounting of the operation in question. On Capitol Hill, Republicans and Democrats alike are calling the allegations serious, illegal.
Let's just stop here. Again, Republicans and Democrats alike. And it's not backbench Republicans. It's not Thomas Massey. It is Chairman Roger Wicker, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. You have the chairman of the Republican House Armed Services Committee. Again, in the House. You have Mike Turner, a powerful voice in the Republican Party on all things regarding armed services, all of them deeply disturbed and demanding that this be investigated.
Serious, illegal, and potentially a war crime. Here's just a sampling of some of their opinions on this.
Congress does not have information that had occurred. Both the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and ranking members have opened investigations. Obviously, if that occurred, that would be very serious, and I agree that would be an illegal act.
If the facts go to where the Washington Post article takes it, well then we'll have to go from there. But if it was as if the article said, that is a violation of the law of war. When people want to surrender, you don't kill them, and they have to pose an imminent threat. It's hard to believe that two people on a raft trying to survive would pose an imminent threat.
If that reporting is true, it's a clear violation of the DOD's own laws of war, as well as international laws about the way you treat people who are in that circumstance. And so this rises to the level of a war crime if it's true. And the questions that we've been asking for months are, give us the evidence that the folks on board were really narco traffickers.
The former JAGs working group said that it unanimously considered the reported orders to kill everybody aboard the suspected narco trafficking vessel and the execution of those orders to constitute war crimes, murder, or both. The group, which includes former officials who served as legal advisors for the military, issued the following statement in response to the Washington Post reporting on that September 2nd attack on a boat in the Caribbean. The group's statement reads in part, if the U.S. military operation to interdict and destroy suspected narco-trafficking vessels is a non-international armed conflict, as the Trump administration suggests, orders to kill everybody, which can reasonably be regarded as an order to give no quarter and to double tap a target in order to kill survivors, are clearly illegal under international law. In short, they are war crimes. The group continues, if the U.S. military operation is not an armed conflict of any kind, these orders to kill helpless civilians clinging to the wreckage of a vessel our military destroyed would subject everyone from SecDef down to the individual who pulled the trigger to prosecution under U.S. law for murder. We call upon Congress to investigate and the American people to oppose any use of the U.S. military that involves the intentional targeting of anyone, enemy combatants, non-combatants, or civilians, rendered or to combat out of the fight as a result of their wounds or the destruction of the ship or aircraft carrying them. We will also advise our fellow citizens that orders like those described above are the kinds of patently illegal orders, or all military members have a duty to disobey.
This is important. Jack Goldsmith, the former head of the Office of Legal Counsel in George W. Bush's administration, writes that if the Washington Post's reporting is accurate, the actions taken are in violation of the Department of Defense's own manual, which prohibits the killing of shipwrecked enemies and constitutes a war crime. Goldsmith cites the DoD's Law of War Manual, which reads in part, "It is forbidden to declare that no quarter will be given. This means it is prohibited to order that legitimate offers of surrender will be refused, or that detainees, such as unprivileged belligerents, will be summarily executed." Goldsmith continues, "The DoD manual is clear because the law here is clear." Quote, "Persons who have been incapacitated by shipwreck are in a helpless state." This is the DoD manual. This is the DoD manual. This is not some left-wing woke person is our fake news that Pete Hegseth would suggest it is. This is the Department of Defense manual that says to shoot people on a shipwreck in a helpless state is a war crime. It would be dishonorable and inhumane to make them the object of attack.
And conservative commentator and Fox News contributor Andrew McCarthy has a new piece in the National Review entitled, "We intended the strike to be lethal is not a defense." He writes in part this, "I believe the attacks on these suspected drug boats are lawless and therefore that the killings are not legitimate under the law or armed conflict. I don't accept that the ship operators are enemy combatants. There is no armed conflict. They may be criminals if it is proven that they are importing illegal narcotics, but they are not combatants. Even by the untenable claim that they are combatants, it is a war crime to intentionally kill combatants who have been rendered unable to fight. I do not mean to be melodramatic, but the penalty for war crimes violation is life, imprisonment, or death if the criminal act results in death. This is a very serious matter. The administration's defense can't be that we killed them because our plan is to use lethal force. And I go all the way back to the fact that these are suspected drug runners on a boat.
Right.
Before they even got to the first strike, that didn't kill 2 people. And then they killed 2 people floating in the water, clinging to wreckage, allegedly.
It's what Rand Paul had said. If you look at Coast Guard interdictions of boats where they think they're drug running boats, said they get that wrong at least 25% of the time. They think somebody's a drug runner, they're not a drug runner. Here, it's hard not to think.
Shout out to Morgan in the building.
That they blew up the boat and then had orders to kill anybody else there because they didn't know who was on the boat. And they didn't want to be exposed as killing fishermen. Or they didn't want to be exposed killing somebody else, or let's say killed, as I heard from somebody in the military today, because their families had been kidnapped by drug cartels and told you have to get on that boat or we're going to kill your families. That was from somebody in the military, in the region, saying if you want to understand if those are drug boats, who would go on those boats, it's people who have families that have been kidnapped. And they're told, go on the boats or we will execute your children.
New questions today about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's orders when elite military commandos struck an alleged drug boat near Venezuela on September 2nd. News reports suggest the military launched deadly strikes on 2 men who survived the initial strike. MS Now has not independently confirmed that report.
I don't know if I believe that at all, because we're doing alleged sources. Nothing has been verified by this. We do know that a survivor that did survive in later attacks was picked up by the United States Coast Guard or Navy, I'm not for sure, and was sent back to his country. And we keep talking about something that's alleged. It's alleged.
If in fact we are in a declared war, and the White House is very contradictory on this, they claim that we're not. But if we're not, then what we witnessed was just a garden variety murder. You cannot kill combatants who are no longer a threat. You cannot execute people.
Joining me now, Joyce Vance, former federal prosecutor, now law professor at University of Alabama and MS Now contributor. Joyce, my friend, welcome. So walk us through the scenarios here, and could there be possible legal implications for Secretary Hegseth?
So the reporting here is that there is an initial strike, and we see that in the 29-second video that President Trump released later that day. What we don't see in that video is what the Washington Post is reporting was a second strike on 2 survivors holding onto the wreckage of that ship that we see pictured there. And the Post's reporting is that that second strike was done because Pete Hegseth gave verbal orders in advance of this September 2nd action that there should be no survivors. Kill everybody is the quote that the Post is reporting. You know, if that's the case, your setup for this segment is absolutely correct. If this happens in the course of a non-international armed conflict, which the White House has advised Congress is what's going on, they say this is all about fighting against narco-terrorism, then the rules of engagement would apply, and that sort of a no quarters order would be a violation of international law. If, on the other hand, there is no armed conflict and this is simply an extrajudicial killing executed by the United States military, then we're looking at murder. So either way, this is something that deserves the level of investigation that prompted a bipartisan group of members of Congress to swing into action on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. You know, an enormous amount of life that we're seeing in Congress saying that they will investigate this thoroughly.
And beyond the defense secretary, what about the elite members of the military who were involved in this particular strike? What are possible implications for them?
So investigate first and then determine what the consequences are. We've seen this early reporting. Now it will be up to Congress. There should, of course, be internal investigations in both the military and the Justice Department. We'll see if that will happen to determine what the facts are. And then there will be a question of accountability, whether that will be political in the form of resignations or even impeachment proceedings against the secretary and others, whether that might mean some form of more formal legal action. That remains to be seen. It has to be based in the facts.
So Democrats who made that video reminding members of the military to not carry out illegal orders are now being investigated by both the FBI and the Pentagon. And Arizona Democrats are asking Hegseth to drop his investigation of Senator Mark Kelly. Do Democrats in the video have legitimate legal exposure on this issue?
No, they don't have any legal exposure. This was a clear, non-controversial statement that the six made about what the law is. The law is that members of the military and the intelligence community may not follow an illegal order. And there's a process that you use in the military for making that determination. You go up the chain of command. There are JAGs, judge advocates, general legal advisors. It's interesting that back in February, Hegseth took out, really eliminated most of that JAG structure. And so now there's an informal JAG work.
Just shut up in here. All that mouth. Just steady running your mouth. Just run out. If this what it is, then it's gonna be legal action. But if this was this, then by far, then you know that somebody has to answer. Shut up! Hit that like button, double tap that screen, subscribe right now, become a member today. You know you just tapped in with your boy Dealatofficial. and my family right here at No Filters. You already know when the building, Chris in the building, I see Rook was in the building, Morgan in the building, Lori in the building. Let's get right in here and understand what's going on, Mike. This is what we doing. Okay, so for those that don't know what's going on, Secretary Hegseth is the Secretary of War. You understand? So some go down, he get the call, he make decisions, he might run it by Trump, or he might just go do it himself. Now, what happened was the man sat there and made his own decision to strike a boat, a drug boat, one at the time, struck it, boom, bang. Got another call to strike the boat again. That's where you trip. Because the first strike, okay, you hit everybody you're supposed to hit and everything. But the second strike was clearly two people on there trying to get away for their lives. And if they got some recording of you saying, hey, bomb the boat, make sure nobody else is living, bye. Oh, you done. It's a wrap. That's murder. You understand? Murder. That's what that is, fam. That's you call overkill. That's you taking over your position. That's you taking advantage of the situation. You understand? And the biggest thing is that right now you're looking at Trump whole administration being dissected. You're looking at Trump whole administration being torn apart. You're looking at Trump's whole administration being picked out one by one. Why? Because the light is coming to dark. The real is being put into the truth, and the truth is being put on the table. You understand what I'm saying? And all of them are deteriorating. That's what's going on with Trump's administration, is deteriorating. And this type of situation right here lets you further know that Secretary Hegseth is about to do some type of time, allegedly. Because right now, Trump wants you to ride for him. But if you do something stupid like he did, Trump ain't gonna ride for you. So you gotta understand, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Secretary Hegseth, these people are in deep waters. Oh, let's keep going. Hit that like button, double tap that screen, subscribe right now. You heard your boy Dealatofficial. Understand, this is duck activity. Why? Because we cook it.
Working group, they weighed in with a very rare statement over the course of the weekend saying that they too believed that whether this was in the course of warfare or not, this was an illegal action by the U.S. military.
Well, President Trump is again saying that he might try to reverse all executive orders he believes involved former President Biden's use of the auto pen, and those include pardons. First question, can pardons be reversed? And what does this mean for future presidents and the pardons Trump has already signed and will continue to sign during his term?
It's a pretty simple answer, Alex. No. Those pardons cannot be undone. The president has an unrestricted pardon power that applies to everything except impeachment. So that's the simple answer. Of course, that doesn't mean Donald Trump won't try, that he won't use this issue as a distraction, something that he desperately needs right now, and that we might not see something take place in court to determine the validity of any effort to cancel prior orders issued by President Biden. They won't get very far.
Okay. Joyce Vance, please come back and see me again very soon. Thank you so much.
Not kill combatants who are no longer
of TV. He's never working and he's always sitting on his fat ass watching Fox. But today, it wasn't his favorite propaganda outlet that he was tuned into. It was the coverage around Pete Hegseth's war crimes, specifically what Mark Kelly had to say, because it is the only reason for what Donald Trump just did. Quitting on Pete Hegseth publicly, throwing him under the bus, breaking with him for the first time during his term in a press gaggle on Air Force One that is shaking up this administration and putting another huge crack in the fracturing MAGA coalition. We are going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button, because it goes a long way in supporting our work.
Like button, subscribe right now.
Before we get into what Trump had to say, quitting on Hegseth, I want to start what I believe led him to get to that point, and it's what Mark Kelly had to say about Hegseth's illegal order right here.
Right now, the Washington Post reporting that Secretary Hegseth gave an order to kill everybody on one of those suspected drug boats during the first strike in September. Are you calling for U.S. service members to actively disobey orders like those?
Well, if orders are illegal, not only do they not have to follow them, they are legally required not to follow them.
Do you think that constitutes an illegal
I think
order?
there needs to be an investigation, and I hope that the reporting is not accurate. I care so much about the United States Navy and those service members. This was an operation involving the most professional members of the military, U.S. Navy SEALs, who I revere. I hope and pray that this is not true. But there needs to be an investigation by the Inspector General. Pete Hegseth fired many of the inspectors general in DOD. But who's ever left needs to investigate it. We're going to investigate it. I sit on the Armed Services Committee. We're going to have an investigation. We're going to have a public hearing. We're going to put these folks under oath, and we're going to find out what happened, and then there needs to be accountability.
Let me ask you.
Now, I certainly do not get the security briefings of a United States senator, so I can't say this with 100%, but I read the reporting. I trust the reporting. The reporting is accurate. Pete Hegseth is a war criminal. I do not need to wait for Congress to tell me that. And the fact that Republicans, both in the House and the Senate, on the Armed Services Committee, are calling for these investigations, are moving forward with these investigations, that these are bipartisan investigations, tells me everything that I need to know. And also, Republicans, it had to rise to war crimes before you would start holding Pete Hegseth accountable and saying, maybe the guy on the third marriage and the fifth affair and the eighth illegitimate child and multiple allegations credibly against him, maybe this guy isn't the right fit to be the Secretary of Defense. How did it take war crimes for us to get to that point? And that's besides the fact that, no, I do believe this reporting. It was an illegal order. Pete Hegseth is a war criminal, and good on Mark Kelly for continuing to call him out, no matter how much Donald Trump tries to move forward with this intimidation plan, because he thinks it's laughable. He thinks that's going to scare Mark Kelly? Really? Get the fuck out of here. That's just a ridiculous notion. Mark Kelly made that very clear.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has personally threatened to recall you to active duty so that you can be court-martialed. Secretary Hegseth adding your video, quote, intentionally undercut good order and discipline. Did it?
I said something very simple and non-controversial, and Donald Trump said I should be hanged, executed, prosecuted. Pete Hegseth said I should be court-martialed. I mean, how ridiculous is this? We say follow the law, and this is their response. These are not serious people. And Kristen, this is meant to just intimidate us. We're sticking up for the Constitution here and the rule of law, and they're saying these folks should be executed for doing that. I mean, Pete Hegseth is not a serious person. He's unqualified for this job.
Now, if you watched the morning shows today, if you watched the Sunday morning shows, you saw a lot of Mark Kelly and Donald Trump, who is always tuning in to these Sunday morning shows, as was evidenced by something he said again about Tim Walz during this press gaggle, certainly tuned in. And I think he sees the building pressure. I think he sees Mark Kelly unafraid. And I think he at least knows that he does not need another set of scandals from a guy in Pete Hegseth who Trump picked to be the Secretary of Defense because he thought that this is a telegenic guy. He can go out there and communicate. He can rah-rah. He can, struggle to do a pull-up, and it'll make us look good. Now, of course, Pete Hegseth is not a good look for anybody, but Trump said that this guy would fire up the MAGA base. But now with Republicans turning on him, wanting investigations, do you think Donald Trump wants to deal with any more of this as his term falls apart? I don't think so. And as is the case with anyone who works for Donald Trump, is friends with Donald Trump, associates with Donald Trump, you are bound to get screwed over by Donald Trump. That is the reality that Pete Hegseth is waking up to.
I don't know what happened. And Pete said he did not want them. He didn't even know what they were talking about. So we'll look into it. But no, I wouldn't want to do the second strike. The first strike was illegal. It was fine.
Midas Touch responded to this quote from Trump, writing, preparing to throw Hegseth under the bus. Now, a lot of people are speculating, and I agree, that Trump's saying, well, I have wanted a second strike. I didn't say to do that. I'm the no new wars guy. The initial strike, killing innocent fishermen, yeah, that was just preventative. That's not me launching an armed conflict, me saying that all the airspace around Venezuela needs to be shut down because I'm threatening them. Oh, that's not me launching into a war. I'm just being the strong guy. Trump is trying to make a little bit of distance between him and Hegseth in the media. He wants people to think that, oh, well, 2 strikes, but Pete did, is too far. I wouldn't have done that. That was his decision. He wanted that carried out. There's a lot of pushing of the blame to Pete Hegseth. This is the clearest break that Trump has made. And he's just quitting on him in terms of his strategy around this bombing campaign in international waters. Trump was backing him up before, saying that this was justified, this was important. Remember, Trump was posting these videos. He was sharing the criminal bombings. Donald Trump was posting his own war crimes. But now, after some backlash, after Republicans saying we need to investigate this, and after a very direct campaign by Mark Kelly to bring attention to this, and good on Mark Kelly, Donald Trump's starting to say, I don't really like how they're talking about me on TV. Because it's always about TV. Let's be honest, people. And he's saying, I'm going to put there's a little line in the sand right there, and that's Pete. Pete did that. I wouldn't have done that. That was Pete's call. Oh, now you're talking about war crimes? That was on Pete. We're doing another round of investigations. That was on Pete. He is clearly breaking with him. He's opening the door to throw him under the bus. He's opening the door to firing someone. I think Donald Trump wants some heat off him right now. And I think in a moment in which he is seeing the lowest approval rating of his presidency, he potentially has another devastating election loss coming up in Tennessee. Shout out to Afton Bain on Tuesday. I think Donald Trump is waking up to the fact that maybe a little shakeup might help him, right? Maybe that's a little distraction. Maybe that's something to feed the media. Maybe that's a look over here. And don't pay attention to Epstein. Don't pay attention to the economy. Talk about Pete Hegseth. That was Pete Hegseth's fault. That's what it was. Donald Trump fired a lot of people in his first administration, and a lot of people resigned. There was a lot of turnover. It's been relatively stable for Trump, right? The MAGA has been pretty locked in, at least in his administration. In Congress, we're seeing resignations. We're seeing threats of resignations for these strikes. This is one of the issues that has Republican lawmakers saying, I don't know if I want to be here. I got to defend this guy. I don't know if I want to be here. So is Donald Trump thinking to himself right now, new Secretary of Defense on one hand, other hand, keep the drunk idiot doing bar crawls on Wednesday nights and killing people illegally, or resignation, Republicans resign if I keep Pete Hegseth and then I lose the House, and the more investigations come, or just new Secretary of Defense. I think that Trump would probably lean towards new Secretary of Defense and get rid of Pete. I don't think he has a lot of loyalty to Pete Hegseth. I think that's where Donald Trump is leaning right now. I wouldn't be surprised. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this was because of Mark Kelly on television today. That's what drives a lot of Donald Trump's decision making. So on that note, I think we need to hear more from Mark Kelly, who was just going off on Trump.
Well, first, let me start by saying we said something very simple and non-controversial, and the President of the United States said, hang them, execute them, prosecute them. In my case, Secretary Hegseth said, prosecute him under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for, by the way, reciting the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's obviously ridiculous, but this is an attempt to silence me, to get me to not hold this administration accountable. We have a president who doesn't understand the Constitution, who installed an unqualified Secretary of Defense. I cannot think of a Secretary of Defense in the history of our country that is less qualified than Pete Hegseth. He should not be in this position. He should have been fired after Signalgate, and now he should be fired again for this, if this is accurate. So he's not going to get me to back down. But what he is doing is sending a very chilling message across our entire nation, not only in the military, but the civilian workforce. Who's going to speak up and say anything if they see something that's unlawful or see something waste, fraud, and abuse? Why would anyone speak out if they can go and try to prosecute a U.S. senator?
Is it happening?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was notified. I was notified about this through a tweet, the same tweet that you saw, and that demonstrates how unserious this administration is. They care more about the publicity about this than the process or the law. I haven't been notified by the Navy.
By the Navy or the FBI. So no court martial.
We got something from the FBI, but the thing we received from the FBI, just like the president said, saying that we should be hanged. The thing we received from the FBI is more intimidation.
What did it say?
Well, it just said there was no point of contact. It had something about coming in for an interview. And the question here should be, why did the FBI decide to do this? Or do you think maybe the president told the FBI director to go after these 6 members of Congress?
I expect to be hearing a lot more from Mark Kelly. And funny enough, very soon I'm going to be doing an interview with Mark Kelly. So actually, if there's anything specifically you'd like to see me ask him, half for Senator Kelly, also just going to need to shake his hand and tell him he's badass, because he is. But this is the energy that Democrats need, and I want to see more of it. We're going to be talking about it and highlighting it on this show. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video.
Hit that like button, double tap that screen right now.
Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, a group of U.S. military lawyers, they're called JAGs, which you were a JAG as well in the Army, have spoken out against Pete Hegseth's, what they're calling war crimes by virtue of his strikes in the Caribbean. So first and foremost, can you talk about what the implications are if you have a Secretary of Defense, or a Secretary of War, as he calls himself, that is committing war crimes under the guise of his office?
It is a criminal offense no matter how you look at these boat strikes in international waters. It violates domestic law. It violates international law. It violates the law of war. Of course, we are not in a declared war with anybody. So the implications are grave. In the event you have a Department of Justice that, is loyal to the rule of law, Pete Hegseth could very easily be charged with murder, the crime of murder, 86 times over now. There have been 11 boat strikes, a total of 86 dead. And the Washington Post reporting today, which preceded this new memo, this new opinion that was just issued by this former JAG lawyer group, the reporting was horrific because apparently, according to folks inside the military or inside the administration, unnamed sources though they may be, when there was a Hegseth-ordered boat strike back in September, there was a drone that was monitoring in real time the consequences of the strike, and it saw 2 survivors, 2 people who were reportedly clinging to the wreckage of the burning boat. And there was a second strike launched to, quote, blow them out of the water. Brian, even in a time of war, there are rules against killing defenseless people, executing injured, even enemies. But this is so clearly in violation of all laws and norms that, Pete Hegseth at some point, unless he is presidentially pardoned at the end of Trump's term, should absolutely be held accountable for these murders.
And that's what I wanted to dig into a little bit here. To what extent does he still shoulder personal liability, even if he's doing it from kind of the protection or the comfort of his position? Like, is he going to be able to leave office, barring, like you said, being given a pardon, which I wouldn't put it past Trump or this administration to do, but is he going to be able to leave office and say, oh, I was protected by virtue of my position, I'm allowed to do this because I was the Secretary of Defense, and so nobody can come after me?
The answer is no. There are things called patently unlawful orders. And according to this JAG working group, this is by far a patently unlawful order. Kill folk in international waters. And indeed, if there are people who survive the first strike, make sure you execute them all. There is no straight-faced claim that is a lawful order. There's no straight-faced claim that it's anything but a patently unlawful order. I mean, we have seen this movie before. We are familiar with the Lieutenant Calley case, which occurred during the Vietnam era, where he was given and he carried out an order to kill all the men, women, and children in the village, whether they were posing a threat or not. What did Lieutenant Calley do? He gave the order. Some of his troops followed the order. Others refused to obey the order. But he, Lieutenant Calley, was prosecuted. He raised the defense of, I was just following orders. And the courts held, no. You cannot use as a defense that you were just following orders if you commit the crime of murder while executing patently unlawful orders, like kill everyone in the village or kill everyone on the high seas, including any who may survive the first strike. So Hegseth will have no viable defense based on the law. Now, he may very well get himself a presidential pardon at the end of Donald Trump's term. And then the issue really becomes, Brian, something I've been pushing for a very long time. Yeah. Does the next administration, let's assume the rule of law comes back into the light of day, and we have a new attorney general who actually abides by both the rule of law and the Constitution, might that person try to challenge a corruptly delivered pardon? Because I find it hard to believe that the courts can endorse, or for gosh sakes, endure a president who essentially commands the murder of others and then pardons the very people who carry out his murderous command. I mean, if that is where the courts want the state of the law in the United States of America to be, then that, will be a very, very dark future for our country.
Just a quick aside before we continue. For those who are watching right now, if you'd like to support our work and support independent media, please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. I'm going to put the links in the post description of this video. Again, if you're not subscribed, it is and always will be 100% free. Glenn, why do you think that the administration was so upset, bristled so hard at the PSA that was posted just a few days ago by Senate Democrats, basically announcing that not only should you defy illegal orders, but you cannot follow illegal orders because of exactly the precedent that you stated? Do you think that it has something to do with the fact that this administration right now is perpetuating these crimes by virtue of handing down illegal orders?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the reason they bristled so hard or lost their damn minds with Donald Trump saying because 6 members of Congress virtually read something called the Manual for Courts Martial, read it accurately, they committed sedition and they should be prosecuted and put to death. I mean, that is what Donald Trump posted. And I think the reason they lost their minds is because, one, they have been doing exactly what they've just been called out for, and they were called out for it in a way by these members of Congress, which is bulletproof. They cannot retaliate against these people for speaking the truth. One, because it is truthful and accurate that military members must not obey unlawful orders. But second, the members of Congress who made this, what I call a public service announcement video, they enjoy speech or debate clause protection. So I think it probably drives Trump and company crazy because they know there's nothing they can do other than, threaten hollow investigations. Of course, they can certainly extract their pound of flesh from Senator Mark Kelly and the 5 other members of Congress by running them through vindictive indictments, vindictive prosecutions, or vindictive court-martial cases. And that can really make somebody's life challenging, difficult, miserable, expensive. But at the end of the day, if they actually try to charge those 6 members of Congress, they're going to have so many robust defenses against the criminal charges that those prosecutions will fail spectacularly, just like the James Comey and Letitia James prosecutions have failed spectacularly. They have been dismissed, and in the event they are either appealed successfully or those cases are reindicted, they will again fail because they haven't even gotten to the vindictive and selective prosecution defenses.
Is there a statute of limitations that would apply to the people, whether it's Hegseth himself handing down illegal orders or committing these crimes, committing murder, or the people who follow his orders, knowing full well, according to the manual for courts martial, that if you follow illegal orders, then you too shoulder personal liability.
The good news, Brian, is there is no statute of limitations on murder, and make no mistake about it, that's what this is. It is murder, it's premeditated, it violates domestic law, international law, and the law of war, and all that is really left is for accountability to come when we again have a legitimate Department of Justice.
You know, Glenn, a lot of times we're watching this illegality unfold and we just kind of have to sit idly by and wait for people to then eventually get into office who we hope will do the right thing. Granted, you can end up with somebody like Merrick Garland, who, you know, is going to be so focused on preventing the optics of politicization that there will never be any accountability when you have someone like that in office. But is there any way to achieve some accountability right now? Or is it just thanks to the fact that we have the Trump administration in office, so long as they continue to be in office, there will never be accountability for these people?
Brian, the good news is there is accountability that can begin this very moment. The bad news is that accountability would be undertaken by the United States Congress. So, you know, and I don't mean to make light of it, but, you know, the Congress can institute oversight hearings or investigative hearings into Pete Hegseth's murderous, lawless orders that he has given repeatedly 11 times. There have been 11 boat strikes with 86 human beings murdered. They could start impeachment inquiry hearings right now, today, this minute. Of course, given that, you know, we've got MAGA Mike Johnson and the Republicans in control of Congress, at least at the moment, that is very unlikely to happen. Congress also has the power of the purse. They could begin to defund things. I mean, there are steps toward accountability that can be taken right now, but it requires a sort of honest, robust Congress that actually cares not only about its own power and authority, but cares about the safety of the American people, cares about the safety of our troops, because right now there are some members of the military who are in the chain of command that carried out those murders that are now at risk of criminal prosecution themselves, and Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, in a very real sense, are endangering our military members by urging them to engage in this unlawful conduct. Congress could step in, it should step in. Will it step in? Seems unlikely while Congress remains in Republican control.
Well, you're right about Mike Johnson, and the notion that Mike Johnson would ever lift a finger to hold any of these people accountable is farcical. But we've just got news within the last 24 hours that Republican Senator from Mississippi, Roger Wicker, who is the Senate Armed Services Committee chairman, has issued a statement alongside Democrat Jack Reed vowing, quote, vigorous oversight of Hegseth's order to, quote, kill them all. So I'm going to read this statement that was issued on behalf of Roger Wicker and Jack Reed. Quote, the committee is aware of recent news reports and the Department of Defense's initial response regarding alleged follow-on strikes on suspected narcotics vessels in the Southcom area of responsibility. The committee has directed inquiries to the department, and we will be conducting vigorous oversight to determine the facts related to these circumstances. So can I have your reaction to the fact that it looks like, you know, judging based just on these preliminary statements that are released, there may very well be some oversight at the hands of, if not the House, the U.S. Senate.
Hear, hear. Anything that prods Congress into wakefulness and begins to not only assert its own power and authority, not only protect the rule of law, but protect our troops. I mean, even if you don't care about human beings in international waters, and as a matter of morality, I think you should care about the fact that the United States is now murdering people lawlessly. You know, at least you can protect our damn troops, because they shouldn't be abused like this by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth.
We'll leave it there. For those who are watching, again, if you'd like to support our work and support independent media, the best, simplest way to do that is to subscribe to our channels. It is and always will be 100% free, but again, it's a great way to support us. I'll put those links right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.
Now chip off that. Clearly what you're looking at right now is the picture of them riding and rolling. And then you see that whole situation just explode from out of nowhere. That further let you know how that got played out. And that further almost showed you who was on the boat. Now, the biggest thing I would say from that video right there you just seen, it gives idea and understanding that we know who was involved. Now that the situation has come out, we know who's involved. Now, again, this is a factor of knowing that Trump's administration is deteriorating. Everybody one by one getting a card pulled, or somebody saying something in line directly into the camera and we dissecting it, or the media dissecting it, period, just from knowing that somebody's lying from the beginning. So either way, they still lying. So it don't even matter about do we believe or what we don't, because we know who's lying, okay? As long as we know who's lying, all else don't matter, fam. As long as we understand who's lying, you understand? So I think that's always been more the case when we're talking about what's going on and who's really doing the lying. Hit that like button, double tap that screen right now. Let's go.
We have major news right now. A group of former United States military JAG lawyers have concluded that Pete Hegseth has committed murder, war crimes, or both. A stunning statement released minutes ago shows a Department of Defense reeling, a Department of Defense that could face military tribunals, military prosecution, all starting at the top with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. The statement was released minutes ago by Just Security, and it highlights exactly how Pete Hegseth violated both United States law and the international laws of war. And I need your help to spread it everywhere. So make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe.
Hit that like button, double tap that screen right now. We're cooking.
The statement released by the former JAGs working group has unanimously considered both the giving and the execution of the orders by Pete Hegseth, and if true, to constitute war crimes, murder, or both. The group was established in February 2025 in response to the Secretary of Defense's firing of the Army Air Force Judge Advocates General and his systematic dismantling of the military's legal guardrails. Had those guardrails been in place, we are confident they would have prevented